Hey, there it is.
Okay,
All right,
there it
there
is.
we go.
This is Team 9, assignment 3.1. I'm Steven Storwick. I will be the facilitator for this meeting. And if you have an assignment or designated role, go ahead and say so.
Okay, I'm Andrew Schuler. I'm the host.
I'm Brad Deemer, Team 9, and I'm a team member.
Chrissy Seaman, Team 9, team member.
John Findeisen, Team 9, team member.
And I will be the jokester for the day as well. I think, okay, yeah, that's correct. So let's go right into the joke. Brad, since you got little ones, if you know this, please don't answer.
Absolutely.
How much does it cost for a pirate to get its ears pierced?
I don't know.
Oh, come on. Nothing?
Nope.
For the sake of time, I'm just going to tell you guys. Buccaneer.
Oh.
Surprised you haven't heard that one. That was good.
I
Buccaneer.
I will tell my little ones though now.
There you go. All right. So I'm glad you guys all appreciated that. Moving on to the icebreaker. So if you could spend an hour or two with anyone in the world who you admire, living or dead, talking about their life, who would you choose and why? Let's start with Andrew.
Honestly, I would choose JFK because, he's always been like a role model to me. And I really liked his courage and charisma, especially like handling all this crazy stuff he had to handle, like the Cuban Missile Crisis and trying to put a man on the moon and stuff like that. So you could tell. I've watched a lot of his speeches, and he just kind of captivates the whole audience. So I think that's something special about him. So I would definitely have a chat with him for an hour or two if I could. That would be really cool.
Cool.
Well, what do you think, Brad?
Mine is still alive, but mine is Tony Robbins. Reason is through my dental practice, he does a lot with team building and teams and team leadership through conferences, and he is the number one reason that we went from being a cruddy dental office, like with not a good performing team, to an extremely high performing team. I like his story from where he came from. He's come from nothing. He's a huge philanthropist, gives billions of dollars away every year. So I really like that. That's who I'd want to spend a couple hours with, pick his brain some more.
So mine is simple. I live far away from family, so I would choose to spend it with my parents. They come out to Arizona for anywhere from 1 to 3 weeks in winter, and I go back for a few weeks or 2 to 3 weeks over the 4th of July and 2 to 3 weeks over Thanksgiving. So I'd like more time with them for obvious reasons. They're still together, 50 years of marriage.
Wow,
and
congrats.
so very commendable.
That's unheard of nowadays.
It really is.
It is.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So John, what about you?
Mine would be, I'm kind of fanboying here, but Howard Schultz, the guy who essentially created Starbucks as is now. I've read all 3 of his books. He started from the projects, and he created a company that we all know and is worth how many billions of dollars at this point. And he's had a lot of courage to do things that a lot of leaders would not do with that big of a company. So I'd just like to pick his brain and see how he was able to stick with it and create the empire he did.
Cool.
Very good.
I would sit down with Theodore Roosevelt.
Oh, nice.
I think 26th, maybe 25th, 26th president. But similar to what you said, Andrew, I think that guy was just a man's man. He was the people's champ. You know what I mean? Full of quotes, bunch of great books, lived a definitely interesting life, especially that time period, when he was a child, Civil War, and then up into the 1900s. It's very interesting, and I'm also a huge history buff, so yeah, I'd probably sit down with that guy.
It's a good pick.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Moving forward. So team preparedness, just going to make a note for our instructor. We all discussed it. We've already updated our team charter to reflect what I'm about to say. Prior to this meeting, David was not available, and he was not available before we even scheduled this meeting, but due to everybody's schedule, we had to do today. So it's not that he's missing the meeting. We had to schedule it without him, which he understood and he was okay with. So he sent forward all his notes and his agenda with all his comments to all of us prior to this meeting. So we would hope that he gets deducted 0 points for not being here. That being said, let's get into everybody's preparedness. So has everybody read all the articles and watched all the videos?
Yes.
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 Everybody.
Yes.
And submitted their notes prior to the meeting.
Yes.
Yes.
With the thing that says submitted prior to meeting.
I did that too. I was so proud of myself.
I know. It's the first time I finally remembered.
I must have been getting confused because for some reason I had my notes and I was not turning them in. So I have turned them in for this time, but for some reason I was doing it backwards.
Oh no.
Good job.
Yeah.
Well, I think that she said that she's not taking. She is from now on going to start taking off if they're not turned in correctly.
Yeah.
Yep.
She sent me a message. I was like, oh sorry.
Never mind. Oh, so you're the reason for the email to everybody.
Probably. Yeah.
All right. Sounds good. Let's move on to number 6. So actually prior to that, another note she made was just keeping each other accountable. I'll make another note about it. I don't think we have an issue with that. We keep in constant communication with each other, which is good. So number 6, review Dr. Chanley's feedback from the initial meeting. I think, Brad, you said that was probably a slight typo, and she's probably referring to the last meeting we did. Once again, I apologize to the team. I uploaded that incorrectly as private. Don't know how I did it, but Chrissy helped me upload it correctly, so she will be able to review it coming up. Has anybody seen any other feedback from her?
I saw something that she
on a
said.
different meeting?
I know that she was talking about before we submitted our notes to make sure they're a Word file. So I don't know. It seems to me like she's going to eventually switch it where it's different styles that you have to turn them in. I don't know.
Are you talking about the Google Drive to YouTube and all that she printed, or no? What are you talking about?
No, but I do have that one pulled up as well.
Oh, we're not there yet. Sorry.
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, she sends out a lot of different announcements, which is nice, for us to keep updated. So it's good that we reiterate it in these meetings just to get everyone back on board.
Correct. Okay, everybody's reviewed the agenda prior to the meeting. Is there anything we need to add or remove today? Sounds like everybody's prepared, so I don't think we need to remove anything.
I think we're
Anything
good.
additional?
I think we're good.
Nope.
I think we're good.
Okay.
I think next meeting, so not the one right after this, but on Friday or whatever, we'll review her feedback from the assignment meeting.
Okay.
And just do a double review.
That'll
Yep.
work.
Okay.
All right.
Who wants to read David's comments?
Can we take turns?
We can take
Yeah.
turns.
Yeah, let's take turns.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Discussion of the readings and videos below are the prompts in the module
Sorry.
3
Bless you.
for each to shine video. So let's get into the prompts that she posted on our notes. So the first one, 8A, is from the textbook, chapter 1. Why do virtual teams fail? What strategies can you use in a team to offset common reasons of the failure of virtual teams? So what are you guys' thoughts on that? I think open discussion on this.
All right. So I took away had a lot of good stuff in there. I actually read this chapter accidentally for the module 1 by not reading, but I read it again briefly, and I thought that having the face-to-face interaction, I found that interesting how without that provides lack of communication and cooperation. So by us having the face-to-face time, I've actually seen that in our virtual meeting, we've been a lot more efficient than we just probably would have been just by, using Google Docs or emailing back and forth. And I know that we need to keep the meeting engaging and keep it fun. And I'm assuming that's why she has us have a jokester and, keep it light. Because, once people stop getting, a lack of cooperation, then, it's just going to get dull. That's what I took from it.
Going in the cooperation, one note I made is we can make sure we all communicate together and not having a few people communicating on the side, like in side group communication, because that can definitely start to make a team hard to work together when there's people having their own little sub teams. Not everyone's getting the same information, so I think that'll help us cooperate together.
And that's very distracting.
Yeah.
I mean, when someone's trying to speak and then you get a group of 2 or 3 on the side, everybody's curious as to what they're talking about and or getting mad because they're talking when they're trying to listen to the actual speaker. So I agree, that's a good point, John.
Subgrouping destroys a team.
I've done that before on Zoom calls with my when I was a store manager. I chat to people and talk shit about people. I'm not gonna lie, but so far I've only done that about Brad, so we're good now.
That's fantastic.
My God, man.
I haven't done that.
David also mentioned about avoiding the subgroups. Kind of makes some people feel a little bit more isolated, less involved in the group. Also brought up communication, and the engagement the engagement factor. And I know, Andrew, you had mentioned about, why we have the jokester and kind of keeping everyone's attention and everyone involved. And I think that was kind of touched on how we share a little bit of personal information about ourselves. We joke back and forth. It's essentially to make us more comfortable with each other, able to engage a little bit more. So those were some of the things that I had as well. But David touched on those too. And just that kind of how we've got clear expectations. We've kind of talked about what we want out of this group, what we want out of this class, to be the favorite, to get an A, and to learn and have fun. So all of those are kind of, I think, will set us up for success, just that we already have our expectations.
Yeah, I mean, basically have a lot of the same things, but a lot of it, she's actually set us up for success on the majority of these, where like going through having the clear goals of the meetings, having she does the agendas for us, but having an agenda laid out in advance so everybody knows what they need to do. There's no miscommunication around that. And what's really worked well for us is upfront communication. Obviously, just like with the David thing, not being able to make this, he is upfront with it. I mean, those all are what can help. Will make a virtual team not fail. Those are the ways that we can use it to not fail.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to piggyback on that, Brad, when it comes to, and the second part of this question is, as a team leader, how can you identify conflict early? And I think what you just pointed out is a clear path to success, right? Just establishing the purpose of the group or of the team before, so everybody has a role and buys into that purpose. So they're motivated individually, but also as a team. It makes things a lot more productive.
So Stephen, a good thing to add is that, you being the lead right now, if you saw that one of us was not responding, if one of us was not engaging, if we looked distracted, you would then just reel us kind of back in.
Yeah.
So I think that's when you're the leader, you kind of have to like pay attention. If you start losing me, just if I start participating less and less and less, like as meetings go by, there's some sort of an issue going on.
And I think that's a great point, Chrissy. I think that's actually what it says in chapter 1 too. Is like one of the main things was lack of cooperation and lack of engagement. And that is for really everybody, but the team leader especially, to notice that the disinterest of the other team members, and if they're just like you said, Chrissy, if they're fading out or just just sitting there like you have to reel them back in as a team leader.
Yeah, and we're all here for the same goal, but I could see how it could be easy for someone to try and just sit here and be like, well, okay, I'm with the team, but then like focusing on whatever, just to get the A. But I definitely think that you guys are right, Brad and Christine, having the engaging conversations, try and challenge people and get more out of people than like yes or no answers.
Yeah, it even said in the chapter, like you were talking about, Brad, is, reeling them in. Christine, with some like a question, so if you are the facilitator or you are the team leader and you see someone sitting back and you just ask the question, what's your opinion on that? What are your thoughts on this? Where do you stand on this topic?
Sadly, you catch the person. It's like, I'm sorry, could you repeat everything that was just said?
Yeah.
Well, that's a key.
Go ahead and step out of the room.
Not engaged.
I hear them regularly on conference calls when someone asks someone a question. They're like, I'm sorry, what was asked?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I hate that.
You have to ask open-ended questions too. You got to make sure they're not a yes or no question.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move on to the article. Are successful teams always harmonious? What is the key point of this article? Anybody want to open it up with that?
Oh, we all do. Rock, paper, scissors. Let's go.
I'm just pulling up David's notes.
Chrissy, go ahead.
Okay, so for me, it's successful teams, they experience tension. They are not always harmonious, and just, that you've got like the good and the bad tension. But the secret is to manage the tension creatively, it said, rather than destructively, which I thought was a pretty good point. And that teams should focus on performance. Keep that in mind of, right now, what are we here to do? That's what our focus is. And you kind of let everything else kind of dissipate and go by the wayside when it comes to a lot of the stress and the tension.
Yeah, I have along the same lines. Yeah, no, not all successful teams are harmonious. But it also is saying kind of what we have. I didn't use the word contract, but, basically they have a psychological contract. They have a safe place that they can come. They can express their emotions, their frustrations, their feelings, and it's a safe place. They're not going to, rile everybody up, and it's not going to be, everybody's not going to turn on them just for saying how they feel. But then also, yeah, it was the entire team has to be clear on the goal that they're working for. And if everybody is clear on that and all decisions are made to lead towards that goal, then the tension that is there will have a tendency to work itself out and propel them towards that goal even more.
When I agree with you. When I started reading it, I really didn't think, in my mind, I read the question. I was like, well, that's a dumb question. Like, groups should always be harmonized. But after actually reading it, I was like, wow, it kind of opened my mind into thinking a different way. I never really thought that you could have the group harmonize too much to become like groupthink. That's kind of what I associated it with. And, it's good to, stir the pot a little bit. And sometimes you can disagree with someone in the team, but you could still be productive and successful. So I took that away from it. Like, I really didn't think about that until reading it. And that, it's opened up my mind.
Yeah. Something I connected with was that being too harmonious can actually be detrimental to the team because people are afraid of speaking up because they want to be a team player. That's something I've had an issue in my career. I'm a pretty harmonious guy. And sometimes I've created that where I'm like, oh yeah, they're afraid to talk up now, aren't they? So, there should be a balancing act where, you want some harmony, but if it's too harmonious, you're going to actually create an environment where people are not comfortable to speak up and try to propel the team forward instead of just stay the same, essentially.
Kind of complacency sets in when the whole team is harmonious. Yeah, everybody just gets complacent. It's like, oh, everything's great. Let's just keep it the way it is.
Yeah.
So
David's comments were very similar to everybody's. One of the things he put also was that team harmony is not necessary for success. And in that article, I think it was pretty clear. I made the same notes that they're open to conflict. They don't care if conflict occurs because they know how to get through it for the purpose of making the team better. Everybody is on the same page when it comes to what is the purpose, and the purpose is to succeed, and they'll do whatever it takes to get there. So personal opinions and personal feelings aren't taken into account with successful teams. They're pushed to the side for that.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Christine. Sorry.
So all I was going to say is that I have kind of like a touch of an example on this is, so I'll just say a hypothetical company that someone may work for, the management tends to agree with the CEO. So when essentially, if you get into a meeting and everyone else says yes, and you say no, you're the person who is coming in and you're being short-sighted, or you're trying to butt heads, or you're being difficult. Although everyone else who said yes does not agree, but they don't want to ruffle the waters. They want to stay on the CEO's good side. So then you're kind of known as the one who will essentially speak out, and you look like you're being difficult because you're the only one who actually brings more the other perspective or tries to represent all the employees or something like that. So I've seen it where it's actually hindered change and getting things to move forward.
Yeah, I think that's in probably almost every profession. I think what you're getting at is just people are afraid to ask the hard questions. especially in a group setting. You don't want to look stupid, or you don't want to, what you said, be called on as the hard person or the hothead or whatever it is. But
outcast.
Yeah, the outcast. But a lot of times those hard questions are what further, progress. And like you said, and I think it was maybe in this article or the next one, but it talked about what you're saying is the outdated practices or the outdated protocols, because people just have failed to ask the hard questions or challenge the status quo.
That reminds me of a term called yes man, the yes man, where there's everyone's on the same page and everything's hunky-dory, like Brad said. But, I think what Christy means is if someone comes out and challenges them, it might change the way that their thinking goes. And then there might be a better idea that no one even thought about. And that was brought on by the discussion of the team, because the outcast or rebel of the meeting that, brought up some good points.
Yeah.
We're all being yes men right now, shaking our heads, yes.
Yes, man.
Yes.
I think it's a good transition into, let's not do that. It's a good transition into 8C, conflict is a place of possibility. In what ways can conflict be beneficial to a team? And I'll just make a note quick on what you just said, Andrew. And one of the notes I took that I thought was interesting on that was the conflict can provoke useful conversation and provide momentum to progress, which is exactly what you're talking about. So conflict can be extremely beneficial because people are open-minded, then, it can definitely create that momentum for progress and change.
Yeah, I did mine on this one, kind of in bullet points though, just because I was thinking what are all the benefits from it? But a lot of them, they're creative thinking, they're critical thinking, because you're bouncing, even when somebody disagrees with you, you're still bouncing ideas off of them. It actually provides for strong collaboration. If you know how to foster it correctly and use that conflict the right way, it really will progress whatever you're working on, because it really does allow a lot of critical thinking and thinking outside the box, just pushing each other back and forth.
Yep.
I put conflict can clarify what's important to someone. So even though they may not be doing it the best way, you'll know what's important to them, and you can use that at that point to figure out how to work with them in order to achieve the goal you guys both want to achieve while still considering what's important to them.
Yeah, that's a good point, John, because I think a lot of times without that conflict, somebody might not get to a point where they feel they really have to put their foot down and say what they really believe. So that can be helpful. I put one other note in here about, during conflict, when the team does identify conflict, they determine solutions, not the needs of individuals. So they're actually finding the needed solutions versus personal opinions or individual wants, which I thought was kind of cool.
I'm going to take a look at David's notes here. He has some pretty interesting bullet points here on conflict. Looks like helps constructive feedback out, especially important subjects, as long as it's not destructive conflict, which, yeah, I agree. Conflict is pretty good. But from one of the other videos, the one lady was saying that she was always avoiding it. And that's kind of how I was throughout my whole career until a few jobs ago. You just realize that you can't run from it. Another note he put here is productive conflict is useful in learning how to diffuse conflict in general. That's a little misleading, but I think what he meant to say is if you're positive and you're looking at the conflict, both sides, that you're both going to take away something you didn't know, that way it's positive, and it kind of hinders the bad conflict, where it's just aggressor versus aggressor. I'm going to have to agree with him, because in my notes, I put also that, destructive conflict can be avoided. I got that from the video. And I feel since conflict can't be avoided, you have to really look at it and then, obviously have probably a mediator, which would be the facilitator, and he needs to hear both sides before he can make a decision. And then, hopefully you guys can find middle ground, and keep moving.
Yeah, I think a good point on that was the comment in the video about move past the attack, right? Get past the feeling of attack or the hearing of an attack and get to the meat and potatoes of what are they really trying to get across to me? they sound angry or they're coming across mean, but like John just said, what do they value? You know, what are they fighting for? And if I can understand that, then progress can be made.
I like that she said in the video, like, be curious.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a very curious person about people's motivations. I like to ask weird questions to people, but I never really thought about in conflict. A lot of times, like, I get defensive and I'm not curious, and I'm like, you know, my Chicago comes out, and I'm like, well, F you, and we just go back and forth. But like, I like the being curious thing, like asking yourself, what's their motivation here, and, you know, asking them questions to really find out what the motivation is, and maybe on the same page, just don't realize it.
Yeah.
So another thing is that it just really talks so much about how you have to change your own behavior. That how you said, John, you kind of go back into your Chicago mode, where it's you kind of have to stay with that open mind, with that trying to not engage with the conflict and trying to almost diffuse it to really get the point out of it, versus that I feel like I have a tendency to, if conflict is coming, I'm ready to engage. If we're going to do this, we're going to do this. So it's to kind of slow it down and almost use against, or, you know, act differently from the way that we always do, or at least that I do, to become a little bit more self-aware, to take myself, calm it down a moment, and try to, like, you know, seek first to understand essentially where the conflict is coming from. I will say that this is the first video through school that I truly enjoyed, that I actually pulled something from. I followed her and connected with her on LinkedIn.
Oh, nice.
There was just something about, you know, sometimes the way that something's delivered to you and you realize you have to change yourself, this resonated with me. So I thought I just had to share that.
That's awesome.
That's cool.
We're tight.
You're tight. Bestie. Yes.
I actually have something pretty interesting on conflict. Just a few days ago, I got kind of in it with one of my coworkers, and basically the gist is he didn't want to follow the processes, the SOPs that I had made. And we sat down with a mediator, and we, you know, I said my side, you know, we need to do the processes because it's how it is. And he gave me his side, and he was like, well, it takes too long and blah, blah, blah. And his excuses were, even he was like, you know what, this doesn't make any sense. I'll just have to follow the process. Like, after him talking about it, which was pretty interesting. So it's nice because then we can move forward. You know, I don't have to fire him, find a new guy, and he understands that I'm trying to help him and be more productive. So it's pretty interesting.
So he had a conflict with himself, and he worked itself out.
Well, just talked it out.
we talked it out. I mean, he was pretty teed off, basically, because I said I had to retrain him, and he's like, "Oh, I'm a veteran." Oh, he's like, you know, I have seniority, you know. So it kind of got a little heated, but after we talked it out a little bit, we both saw eye to eye from each other, which is nice.
Good job, Andrew.
Yeah.
Testament to all your hard work. That's a good point. I mean, I think a lot of us have probably been involved in some form of conflict like that. And I think a lot of times, like you said, Andrew, if you sit people down and you just got to identify what the purpose is. Like, what is your purpose? Is your purpose to further your personal agenda, or is it to, you know, create progress for the betterment of the team? And sometimes we all have ideas, like the teacher said, you know, we all throw our words or our ideas into the bowl, but they don't always stick. And you got to be willing to say, oh, that was my idea, but it wasn't a good one. That's fine. Let's move on, because we want to succeed as a team, not just as an individual. So that's cool.
I think getting that mediator was a good idea. Sometimes when you are emotional and you realize you're emotional, having a third person is a very important thing. When I used to work for AT&T, my sales reps were union. It was a blast. But I was trained in conflict negotiation, and I had to sit in between employees just wanting to duke it out. But like having a third person to like remove emotion for that moment really made people clarify what they're thinking. Usually it helped out, but it's important even when you're in conflict to realize, hey, maybe we're not going to figure this out together. We should get someone else involved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, we're not there yet, but that is obviously a good transition in the types of conflict, C conflict or A type, but we'll get there in a second. You hold on to that. Video, the dare to disagree. How can your team ensure that they are benefiting from dissenting views? Chrissy, what's your opinion on that?
The interesting comment was openness cannot drive change, or openness alone cannot drive change. It was another thing to kind of embrace everyone's differences, whether it's gender, nationality, religion, difference of a department, just the differences, to kind of embrace those up front. And come with an open mind. Don't be afraid to speak up, and view the conflict as a form of thinking, where you and the person you're in conflict with, or the people in conflict, are all thinking together and collaborating together.
Yeah, I agree with all of that, but I did like the point she made as well, like surrounding yourself with people who are willing to challenge your agenda.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they can disprove what you're doing, then it can put you in the right direction or a different direction. Or if they can't disprove what you're doing, it even solidifies and legitimizes what you're doing more so. So surrounding people that are willing to question you, surrounding people that are saying, hey, I'm not on this agenda. I'm going to work as hard as I can to disprove what you're trying to do. And if I can't do it, that really legitimizes the progress. So
yeah, it's just a validation for them.
It's a validation.
Yeah.
David commented on that, when they were talking about the x-ray and the pregnant woman, and she had a dissenter. He said, I found it truly brilliant that it is okay to disagree in a manner which benefits a team to prove themselves correct.
Yeah.
So I think he's going to
well put.
True.
That's a good statement. I agree with everything you guys are saying, and especially what Chrissy was saying. I thought that open mind part was pretty interesting too. I made a bullet point of that. I wrote in my notes, need to be prepared to change our open minds based on thoughts of others to grow as people. So I guess that goes hand in hand. Also, another thing I took away is disagreements between team members should be productive and make like success and growth. Because at very least, where their standpoint is and your standpoint is, and obviously people are passionate about their own views. But disagreeing, could also open up new ideas and stuff like that if handled the right way.
Yeah, I put down that when people are disagreeing, that they, it shows they care, and they're not just disagreeing to disagree, but they actually care about you and the issue. So you should look at it with that part of an open mind to actually read into why they're disagreeing, and they're not just doing it to attack you.
Nice. Any further comments on that? We want to move forward to the George Washington University.
George Washington.
Move forward.
George Washington.
All right. George Washington. All right. So the website sections on conflict 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. In what different ways is conflict categorized? Brad, start us off.
I have different ways. I mean, they went over like the winning, the sharing. There was a ton of different ways that they categorized them: working, controlling, like, dislike. But I've never heard it before, but was the cognitive and the affective, those top, I think they were one of the top two on that portion, but I'd never heard those before, like that type of conflicts. And that cognitive was the best, like you're fighting for the best possible solution. And that's all that matters, is getting it done, the best way possible for the team. Whereas the effective winning was just number one. I'm out to win. That's all it is about. That was probably the biggest thing that I took away from that first part of it.
Yeah, I agree. That was pretty much one of my main notes. And just to the same point, is I wrote down conflict is inevitable, and it's an opportunity to understand opposing sides when done rationally, which is another thing, which is what you're saying. So I'm just
keyword rationally though.
Yeah, that's a key word, right? Is rational.
Yeah,
so,
and
that's cognitive. You're choosing to do it.
Yeah, and like I would say, I think that's like the hardest thing to do in a conflict, especially that. I mean, I say it all the time because even when I said earlier, like Tony Robbins was the person I want to hang out with. Ego is just a huge killer of everything, because if you can't let go of your ego, you're going to have a conflict. And even coming back to what Chrissy was saying in the last portion, you can't see other people's views. You can't allow it when you have an ego, or that you can't release. You cannot see other people's views. You cannot get their perspective. You have no empathy towards what they're trying to do. And it just, that for me, that one word is a team killer. It's a business killer. I've seen it kill businesses.
Yeah.
I'm gonna play a little devil's advocate to this one. I agree that rational and cognitive is the way to go at this with conflict resolution, but I think we forget that emotions drive humans as much as we try to think we can control our emotions. We're still nothing but emotional creatures. So if you can channel someone's emotional disagreement with you or whatever the process is, if you can channel it in a right direction, they will do way more than someone who's thinking rationally. And it's a hard thing to do, but emotions are what really creates, some of the best decisions that are made in a lot of, in very important moments in lives of ourselves and our history.
So you're saying like if somebody's like super emotional, if you're a good leader, you can take like that emotion, that powerful emotion, and just lead them in the correct direction, and that'll be more productive.
Yeah, like if they're if they are super emotional. Now, if it's emotional where they're attacking people, that obviously is different. But if they're super passionate about something and they're disagreeing with whatever company policy is, whatever, we can try to channel that emotion and be like, "What's your solution? Let's run with this." And get them to use that emotion. That when people are emotional, they do a lot of things. When they're rational, they're boring.
John, I'm going to say that what you just said is that the person who is trying to work with the emotional person is being rational.
Yeah, you can't emotion with it.
But I understand. I mean, great decisions and bad decisions, they both can be made with using like emotion versus being rational. So there are those times where sometimes emotions can be the way to go. But
to John's point, and I've seen this in, personal experiences, but also in other classes we've discussed it. I think, John, what you're talking about is when we're talking about having rational conversations or rational conflicts, there's going to be motivators that are underlining there, right? It's whether the common goal or, the team purpose, whatever it is. But some people they're not going to buy into that just with the purpose. Some people need to be inspired. And that inspiration is the emotion that drives people. And I would 100% agree with you that I think inspiration is way stronger than motivation. Motivations are usually external, sometimes internal, but when you're inspired by a great leader or a great concept or purpose, you don't need any external motivations. You don't need anything. You're just emotionally inspired to do work. So I would 100% agree with you that if you can trigger that in somebody, I would way rather be a leader who inspires people than a leader who motivates people, because that's touching that emotion.
I agree.
Great point.
That's pretty good point. I agree with that. People have a lot of emotion and passion sometimes, but I think sometimes if you guide them to be too passionate or too emotional, then I don't know. I feel like it could almost hinder the team in some sense, whereas like you almost lose focus of what you're doing because, person X over here is just so emotional about it and they just won't, get off that topic or whatever. I could see how that could maybe hurt a team maybe. And Brad, to your point, I don't know. And I know the ego is really bad for teams, but what if you had a leader who had an ego and then somehow spread that over to the team where the team had an ego, where the team now carries the ego, where they're, handling the goals and trying to get stuff done. I don't know. I mean, I guess that's devil's advocate, But
I can see your point. I think the point, maybe I missaid it, is in a conflict. Like, cause this was like on conflict. Like if you it's hard in a conflict. If you have a very strong ego or you're very, very opinionated on something, even if you're wrong, it's hard to have a conflict with that person because that type of person typically cannot see it from another person's perspective. Like Chrissy was saying, they can't, they can't rationalize with, or they can't, I guess what was it? It was the empathy. They can't empathize with them and see it from their perspective. I guess that's what I was trying to say.
Got the blinders on.
Huh?
Got the blinders on.
You're
like a horse.
There you go. Yeah, there you go.
Well, Brad, just to get personal, I've been through therapy on and off for years of my life. And one of the biggest things that was kind of pushed is you let go of your ego. Your ego is detrimental the ego is detrimental to you. It is unhealthy. People place way too much focus on it. And the biggest thing that you can do for yourself is eliminate the word ego, eliminate having one, and become practice humility. and you're gracious, and the world does not owe you anything, and you do not need all of this praise and success to feed you. You're already fed with what you have.
Mm-hmm.
So you touched on ego. It really resonated with.
Awesome. No, that is amazing what you just said. I fully agree with you on that. That's awesome. One other thing that we do in conflict, after a conflict, is, I guess, what is the word, metacognition, or like think about the reason you think the way you do. So like after a conflict, if it doesn't go well, we'll have team members sit there and even write, before they come back in, like, why do you think the way you think? Because when you do that, you really get a deeper understanding of yourself. And a lot of times that will trigger it, like, oh, wait a minute. I think, Andrew, like it was like what you said, all of a sudden the guy was like, oh, wait a minute. This is kind of what's going, this doesn't make any sense. Why was I thinking this way or acting this way? I don't know. That was a random thought right there.
No. I think all that was good conversation, a good discussion. In the video, it did make a point on the George Washington video that we had to watch that the ideal thing to do in conflict is collaborate if you have the time, right? It did make note that if you got the time, collaborating with one another, which is what we're discussing, is going to be the most beneficial for everyone, because you're going to understand, you're going to have the time to understand everybody's perspectives, everybody's motivations, what inspires them, what triggers them, what motivates. It gives you everything. So at the end of the day, collaborating, which is what I think this whole course pretty much is about.
And that collaborating is we versus you, or we versus me or I.
Mm-hmm.
It's what we all just did on this one.
That's right. That's good, John.
Oh,
I was saying high five.
Oh, it was a high five. I liked it. All right, let's move on. So 8F. On the website, in the article, conflict, an important dimension in successful management teams. How can a leader steer his or her team toward constructive conflict? Andrew.
I think a leader could, obviously steer the team by, providing the guidance that the team needs. Sometimes you have teams with a lot of good individuals, and the leader's job is kind of to hone in and grab all these individuals, understand their thought process to some degree, and then, smush them all together and make a uniformal team where people can, have egos, and people can have extreme passion, and people can have thoughts that aren't going to agree, but the leader needs to dial it back in and, get the goals done, mainly. So he needs to be able to understand all the people working on the team and the triggers that trigger them and things that motivate them as well.
Yeah, David put one of the things that a leader can do is keep the team focused and on track, right? So we've talked about in previous weeks about providing relevant information. We actually put that in our team charter. And when people have those side conversations or the subgroups, or they get off track, a good leader will be able to steer his group back to the focus, to the purpose or the objective. So David made a good point with that.
Yeah, that is a good point.
One thing I like is providing the right environment for a meeting, one that supports conversation.
I like that.
That makes a big difference, actually, like how the room's set up, who's sitting next to each other.
The round table.
Yeah, like it does make a difference. I've been in some meetings where it's like really awkward to talk to each other, and you end up getting the subgroups talking to each other, and then no one's really collaborating.
Yeah, I think even though it's funny and you always hear about the round table, I've also been involved in a lot of meetings that have rectangle or square tables, and oddly enough, almost always does the top dog sit at the head of the table. But I have frequently had really good leaders who don't. They'll sit in the middle of the table if it's not a round table. They immerse themselves in the group versus just taking that designated, what people would think is a designated position. So if possible, a round table really does make a difference. It kind of puts everybody on an equal playing field.
I agree. You can see everyone's faces too when you're
Mm-hmm.
at a round table.
Yeah.
If you're at a square, the guy next to me, I can't really see his emotion. Basically, I could just hear him. I could kind of look at him from the side and be like, or whatever.
One example I like too was they were talking about like Sam Walton, how he would let other people facilitate the meetings. He would give an agenda, let other people facilitate, so he could keep a sense of like where the meeting's going, if it's getting too personal, or he could redirect the conversation. I found that pretty interesting too. If you are a leader, maybe sitting back and watching it and just helping redirect the conversation versus control the conversation.
I like that a lot as well. I think you get a really good overview versus when you're facilitating, and we all know when you're facilitating, you have an agenda to go through, and you're trying to get through that agenda efficiently. Whereas if you take a step back, you can observe how that agenda is going, how people are receiving it. But if you're focused on your task of getting through the agenda, you're not going to be able to have that same perception.
And if you're leading it, you will say yes all the time.
Yeah, I was going to say, when you're the leader and you're the CEO or you're the Sam Walton of the group and you give your opinion first and then everyone now has to give their opinion, it's a lot easier to say, I agree, great point, great point.
That's a great point, Chrissy.
Yeah. That was a great point, Chrissy. Well done.
I've done a decent lot of hiking, and I'm going to relate to your point right now. The leader is supposed to hike in the back, so to make sure that everyone is accounted for. So I think that it'd be pretty interesting if, the leader should give his point at the end after everyone else goes through their points. So that way they can't just piggyback on what the leader said, like, oh, yeah, I agree 100%. They kind of have to be more creative.
Yep. For an example, and this is just personal, Andrew, that's exactly how we operate. Obviously, as a leader, you lead by example, right? And that's done during all the hard hours of training or working or building up to a project. But when it's time for game time, the leader leads from the back. You're really the facilitator. You're moving pieces around when needed. You trust your team to get the job done. You don't have to be up front. And it's very difficult to manage a team or lead a team when you're a part of the action. So it's very hard to supervise it or lead it when you're involved in it. It's hard to get the big picture. So leading from the back is actually really important.
Yeah, and playing off of what you just said, Stephen, I had, one way that a leader can do it is by consistently exhibiting the behaviors that he wants his or her team to produce or act like. So, even for constructive conflict, if the leader can't have good conflict, constructive conflict, the people, his followers or his team members will never have, they will not ever be able to work through conflict constructively. But then the one thing, I don't know why, I guess it irks me, but is in there, it was talking about, it was even also saying the boss has to be proactive, reactive, and not passive. Yeah. But I 100% agree. You cannot, I don't know, it's just me. You cannot be a reactive person. If in business, even in a team, if you are reactive, that is going to cause conflict. That's where tensions come from. That's where conflict comes from. You can't be passive either, but you have to be proactive. But I guess that's just been ingrained in me. Oh, go ahead, John.
No, I was just thinking, in the case of a meeting, it's not always possibly proactive, so you can't predict what everyone's going to think. And if you are, you might actually limit what they're going to think. Exactly. So the way I took that as being reactive, where if someone does say something that is, conflict or confrontational, and it maybe is personal, then you react to it and say, hey, maybe we need to go a different direction. I agree with you. Being proactive definitely in business is very important, but when conversations are happening, you're going to have to react because there's no way to know what everyone's going to say.
Sure. Okay, I got you. Yeah, I like that. I like what you said. Thank you for that.
I agree with what both of you said. I mean, they both make strong points.
It's two different positions. One's in a meeting, one's actually leading the progress or the process. So I think they both work. Correct. I didn't have any additional things. Be focused and address core issues and problems and have a clear agenda as a leader. That's a huge one. When I sit down with anybody, if they have an agenda in front of them, well, just like you pointed out, Brad, teacher provides an agenda to us that helps keep us on path. You don't have a clear agenda. People don't understand the clear expectations or what their job is or what the overall purpose is. It's hard to motivate or inspire anyone. So definitely need to know that end goal. All right.
Can we read David's comment really quick? One thing he wrote was creativity also. It was also something that helps teams steer constructive conflict. So coming up with ideas and solutions outside the box, this can lead them doing innovative solutions compared to the same plan. So I think that's a good point.
Right on, David. I agree.
He typed a lot, yeah.
He did type a lot.
He makes some good points, though. I was reading through his notes here the whole time. Just right on the money.
Definitely.
Yeah. He made some great points. Okay, let's move on. Unless anybody has anything else on the readings for videos. Okay, number 9. Other thoughts, comments, or discussion points on this? We got it all out there?
think we did. I think we had some very good back and forth collaboration, and yeah.
Yeah, good discussion this meeting for sure. Questions for Dr. Chanley? Anything?
I don't have anything.
All right, moving on. How did this meeting go? Did everybody feel like we covered the topics we needed to and got a good understanding of what we read?
So I felt that we did a great job of covering all the materials, covering all the information. But I also felt like and I don't know if it's the subject matter, but more personal stories and personal like assessments and more relating to your own life work were brought in, which kind of helped us understand a little bit more. Like Andrew bringing in the example with him and his employee and the mediator. It's kind of that when we're able to talk more about it and use examples and kind of expand upon the reading and the material versus just the words that we've typed up as our notes, I feel like I'm understanding the concepts much better. So I personally have enjoyed this meeting the most and just felt everyone was a little bit more engaged.
Yeah, I agree. Even with us being down a team member, even though David submitted our notes, that's a first for our team. I feel like this was one of our better teams going forward. Not saying that he wasn't here. It'd be great if he was here, but just that we all came together and, it was good to see us not all agree, but pretty much understand everyone's points. I think that's the key here.
I think one of the points Dr. Chanley had made, and she continues to make every week on the announcements, is the importance of open discussion and not, hey, Andrew, provide your answer. Chrissy, provide your answer. And Brad, provide your, and just moving forward. Someone makes a comment, John says something, and we all comment on that. We have a discussion about it. It's not necessary. It's dynamic that way. And I think people get out, like you said, Chrissy, personal experiences, and we learn a lot more about each other, and we understand the actual topic a little bit more as well.
I have a really quick question. How does everyone feel we did with taking David's notes and incorporating them?
I think very good,
I
actually.
thought it was very fluid.
Yeah, he had
obviously he would have been able to, interject with his own opinions and kind of engage in the conversation because none of us really verbatim read our notes. Mm-hmm. So I think this was a little bit different. I felt like in the last ones, I kind of read the notes. So with this, I'm sure he would have jumped in more with expanding upon some of the topics that we covered as well from his pulse from the reading and his personal life as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought he made really good notes though, actually, that were in phrases that weren't just bullet pointed. It actually sounded like he was saying
talking points.
Yeah. And I really thought we all randomly read through his notes too, just kind of naturally. So I think it went well with that, but I would have liked to hear his opinion, but for the situation went well.
That was definitely a new dynamic, but like you said, I think we addressed or acknowledged his opinions or his notes on every question, which is important to get his opinion in there since he's not here. But yeah, I think it went really well. I don't have anything to add. Any changes for the next meeting? So obviously we've all agreed that our next meeting is going to follow this immediately.
Yes.
When we're done here, we'll stop this video and we'll start the new one, probably about 1,800 hours on 9/10, and that'll be a 30-minute video.
So for the next meeting, I've sent out the Zoom, so I will set that out and I'll submit it.
Okay.
Awesome.
Be the host.
Do you guys want to keep the same positions, seeing as how this is just a 30-minute video?
Yeah.
We could keep them. Chris, you could take the host if you want.
Oh, Christine will take the host because she sent it out?
I mean, it makes the most sense unless you want me to do it.
Well, because you're going to have to close down your system, convert the file, upload it. So then this way you won't spend 45 minutes after the class doing both.
Right.
Awesome. Thanks, Christine.
Cool. Mm-hmm.
All right. So we already know the instructions for the next meeting. We talked about it. So I think we're good to end this meeting.
I actually got something.
Yeah.
I remember that we put something in here. For number 13, she had put something that we need a role of a challenger for next week as well.
Yeah, I already have it. You did. That's on the Friday one, right?
Yeah, Friday.
Yeah, that's me.
Cool. Have we already selected roles for that one?
David will be the facilitator for next week.
Oh, yeah.
Friday, I'm sorry.
That's right. I'm the submitter.
Mm-hmm.
All right, cool.
Right.
Cool. I think that we should be successful with this one.
So then so I think then you'll end the recording. We'll all join the other meeting,
Perfect.
Yes.
right?
See you guys in about a minute.
All right.
Later.